we're changing the scenario a bit. We talked about SEO. Now we will talk a bit about SPO, which is, as most of you probably know, supply path optimization. And now we will use our event to promote a fresh release from IB Europe Programmatic Trading Committee. So I would like to invite here the head of Programmatic Trading Committee at IB Europe, David Goddard, and members of the Programmatic Trading Committee, which are, and I have to find them, Lisa Kaluzhny from Programmatic, Sylwia Sajewska from Magnite, Krzysztof Lis from YieldBird, and one more, Mark Bossinger from Double Verify. So just 1 second. Do we have you all here? A little bit more clicking before. Guys, hi, nice to have you here. I'm giving the mic to David. Just a short tip to the viewers. Change your view to gallery view. For the panel, it's much nicer and much more convenient. I did it on my end. I don't know if it worked for all of you, so just change the view to gallery view. And David, off to you.
Really good tip. I've just changed it to gallery view as well. And hello, fellow panelists. Hi, everyone. My name's David Goddard, and I'm Double Verify's Senior Director of Business Development in EMEA, responsible for expanding partnerships with digital media and technology companies. I'm also chair of IB Europe's Programmatic Trading Committee, which is a multi-stakeholder group which aims to increase the understanding of the programmatic ecosystem, the impact it's having on digital advertising, and influence the industry via initiatives. And one such initiative is the recent SPO guide that we released. Since the birth of digital advertising, the digital ad ecosystem has become increasingly sophisticated year after year. This has appeared to accelerate exponentially once programmatic entered the ecosystem, and especially in more recent times with the introduction of new supply paths such as header bidding and other dynamic allocation. This has led to a loss of transparency and increased opacity for advertisers, agencies, specifically related to fees charged with the intermediaries. This led IB Europe's Programmatic Trading Committee to create a guide to share their expertise of what SPO enables, demystify common misconceptions, and highlight the importance of SPO for the different stakeholder groups, and provide a step-by-step guide on how to start and implement SPO. The guide also features an overview of demand path optimization for publishers as well. So look, after this, I recommend that you go and download the guide after this event. However, you're about to get a taster on the guide's content now, as this panel will cover and give an overview of the newly released SPO guide and its most interesting findings, as well as address the technicalities of supply path optimization and whether it's delivered on its promise to streamline buying via programmatic platforms, and also take a look into the publisher perspective of this matter, addressing demand path optimization mechanisms along with key challenges and global best practices. So I will now stop talking and ask my fellow panelists and co-authors of the guide to introduce yourselves and also answer the question, what are your key takeaways from the guide? Lisa, I'm going to come straight to you.
Thanks, David. First on the spot. So I'm Lisa Kaluzhny. I run demand across EMEA for Programmatic, which is an SSP, and Eki has already given everyone kind of an overview of what we do. To answer David's question, I think that the SPO guide for me was really understanding all of the nuts and bolts that it takes to complete SPO, and really starting from not what we in programmatic think is step one, but actually what an advertiser or what a brand who is looking at something brand new would really look at step one. So all from the beginning through to the end.
Thank you very much. And Sylwia.
Yeah, hey. So I'm Sylwia, and first of all, thank you for having me. It's a huge pleasure to be on the YieldFest 2020 with you guys. I cover the demand side within Magnite, the SSP, and the guide. I think this is like two things which the guide managed. So first of all, SPO does drive the agendas of the leading media holdings within the Europe and within the globe, or on the globe, I would say. But still, there is a huge gap of the understanding what SPO is and how to execute on SPO. So I think, first of all, the SPO guide raised attention like how important SPO is, and showed or touched on how and why to execute SPO. And the second thing, and I think this is even more important, this SPO guide, just because it brings SPO and DPO in one place, it is a huge testament to the programmatic ecosystem. Just because what we observed in the past, in the last months and years, was SPO being always the only one topic discussed on agendas of leading conferences, and separately DPO. And this guide brings two things, very important things together. And this is like how the programmatic ecosystem should work.
Really good insight there. Thank you. Christoph.
Hi, everyone. So my name is Christoph Lies, and I'm currently working as the customer success team manager at YieldBird. So I'm working on the publisher side. We're trying to make the most money for the publishers that we work with. But previously, I was also working on the buy side. So I was managing the campaigns on the programmatic ecosystem. And I would say that the most important thing about the whole document is that it addresses the myths that are sometimes associated with the SPO, that it's time consuming, that it limits the amount of impressions I might get, that it's difficult. And if it's done right, it's none of these things. And the document also provides a step-by-step guide, which is always the good approach to do something right from the very beginning. Thanks.
Thank you, Christoph. And Mark.
Hi all, my name is Mark Balsinger. I'm Director of Publisher Business Development at DoubleVerify. I think one of the big things that I took away from the guide, or at least the structure of it, and specifically thinking about the DPO, the demand path optimization section that I worked on, was to really create like a kindling for the fire of knowledge, right? It's not necessarily to say we're going to answer all the questions that you may have, or we're going to provide a concrete footpath, but to start by asking questions, right, and creating knowledge gaps that are more specific than maybe the daunting challenge of just saying DPO or SPO, providing a couple of use cases, a couple of understandings, and some things that we've seen and experienced that have been successful, and then being realistic about the benefits and challenges of SPO and DPO. Really, this is a guide that was designed around not necessarily answering every question, but trying to ask the right questions to ask more questions down the road.
Perfect. Look, we're going to start with SPO and then jump to DPO. But I'm going to start with SPO with a three-part question, just to keep it simple. And Lisa, I'm going to put you on the spot first again. Sorry. There are three questions here, and you can answer all or focus on the ones you want. But what are the problems that the SPO is designed to solve? What are the main benefits? And what are the common approaches to SPO?
Thanks, David. I'm happy to take the first tab only because it's your birthday today. So I will do as the needful. So I think, what was it? The benefits? Sorry, repeat that again. Benefits.
So what are the problems that SPO is designed to solve? Yep. What are the main benefits? And what are the common approaches?
Yeah. So from a problem standpoint, I think number one is transparency. It has come to light, I think, over the past couple of years that everyone wants to be able to look under the hood and be able to understand what they're buying. So transparency is one of the key pillars, I think, of SPO. I think it's also about education and understanding the inventory and the supply, and knowing that, I think Eki in his earlier presentation talked about the number of connections that an SSP has to the number of DSPs, and it was something that was surprising to everyone. So I think kind of understanding the ecosystem is something that it is meant to solve. From a benefits perspective, I think it goes to knowing what's under the hood, knowing what you're buying, and allowing for more strategic paths to that. And now I've forgotten the third piece. Sorry, I'm having a blonde moment today.
Common approaches. So how would you go about doing?
Yep, definitely. So I think you start from that education piece. So understanding what you want. So what are your priorities? Is it transparency? Is it efficiency? Is knowing what the options are and being able to ask your partners to provide you with the tools necessary. And really, if you know the questions you need to ask, which going back to the guide that IAB Europe put together, that has all those kinds of questions that all sides of the ecosystem should ask, that kind of gives you the tool belt to go then to your vendors and be able to ask those questions. I think everyone on the team now has all the questions because you've repeated them 3 times. So thanks, David.
Perfect. I'm happy to repeat them again, but yeah. Sylvia,
you need them in writing.
No, this is not necessary. So yeah, so when we think about how the programmatic ecosystem changed in the last 2-3 years with the introduction of header bidding, we will then be able to answer your question, David, like what is SPO designed for? And I think this is mostly about turning the complexity to simplicity. Just because what header bidding did is like it democratized access to supply and it multiplied the access to supply. So if we think about all the paths the buyers now have to buy the inventory, we are thinking, or we are also speaking about taking the decision. So this is also like SPO is designed for, to answer buyers' questions and create the possibility for buyers to get more control and take the decision. But why should buyers do this? I think also because of what SPO should do. It should create increased and better outcomes for buyers and DPO for publishers. So this is like making the decision on the most transparent paths, on the most efficient paths, and then turning the way how buyers perceive SSPs from pipe to the partner, just because this is like, and I think Lisa could say this is true, how buyers started reacting or acting with SSPs. We haven't been that much common or on the attention of the buyers, but now we are becoming the partners for buyers. So this is like how SPO works now. When it comes to the paths, I think there are 2 ways. The first one is then an autopilot, an automated SPO, which is driven by the algorithm. And the second, which is, I think, more populated in the markets outside, is the manual SPO. It is like the strategic approach made by the agencies, normally by the trading teams, on which pipes to focus on to buy the desired inventory. So this is like how, in my understanding, SPO works today.
Thank you very much. Really clear perspective from the buyer side. What about the publishers? What's their perspective? And what about DPO? I know it's heavily focused in the guide, but how does SPO fit with DPO, and what's the publisher perspective? Mark, I'm going to come to you first on this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, in many ways, DPO and SPO are 2 sides of the same coin, right? An optimization of the path that either supply or demand takes. And I think just organically that's reflected within the guide. In terms of the benefits, right, to take your 3 topics and kind of turn them back towards publishers and DPO, obviously the revenue growth is the long-term vision, but I think there's also a number of tangential benefits that come off of it, right? Because you're optimizing channels, you're decreasing latency. Decreasing latency obviously increases page speed, that helps with page rank. And then it has a better user experience that brings on more users, that makes user retention easier. I really see a positive feedback cycle out of DPO, where not just because you're obviously trying to grow your revenue, but you're really trying to optimize your entire page and really make it more about the user in the end game. And I think that's valuable for any publisher. And then in terms of, I guess kind of the common strategies, I'd say definitely mapping is one of my big first keys. Just to lay out all of your partners, understand, at least in a semi-visual way, how to look at the programmatic landscape that you're currently a part of, and understand what part you play within that world. That is normally a very solid first step, and at least gives you a very basic understanding of where we're at right now. Moving from there, obviously, it becomes a little bit more challenging as you negotiate with partners, as you work with the partners of partners and form more direct relationships. But I think from a DPO perspective, the value is obviously having all of that put together and having that positive feedback loop of user growth, of revenue growth, of programmatic optimization. That is what really makes an overall successful DPO strategy.
Thank you very much, Mark. And Christoph.
Well, I definitely agree with Mark, because SPO and DPO are definitely the two sides of the very same coin. We share the common interest. We all want, the publishers want to sell all impressions for the best price, and the buyers want to buy the best impressions for the lowest price, which seems maybe like it's not the common goal, but at the end of the day, we all want to have the best access to the inventory, the best access to all the buyers that are on the market, and eventually pay the lowest fees. Because if the buyer, if a publisher, for example, works with the SSP that has very high fees, very high rates, then if in case of the header bidding setup, they use the bid adjustment feature, and they simply eventually make this SSP win less impressions, which for all the DSPs connected to it, make it more difficult to buy impressions on this very page. So we all want to make the buying of the impressions easiest, cheapest, and fastest, because like Mark just mentioned, the less SSPs we have on the site, the faster it loads, the faster it works, and definitely provides the user with the best experience possible.
I think we lost you just at the end there, Christoph. It jumped to mute just in the last 2 sentences.
Sorry. So from the publisher's perspective, what I would do is to map all the best ad units that you have and simply open them to the best performing SSPs, and it is pretty much what the manual suggests us to do. Fantastic.
I mean, really good insight from all there. And I mean, on paper, and the stories and the benefits you're all talking about, it seems like a no-brainer, but obviously there's probably cost to this. If a publisher or an advertiser or an agency wants to implement DPO or SPO, they're gonna have to write a business case. So, I mean, I know you're not going to be able to spell out everyone's individual business case, but it'd be good to highlight kind of what is the investment, whether it's cost and resource, to deliver SPO and DPO, and will it deliver return on investment? I really don't mind who takes this first. I will open it to the floor, and whoever wants to jump in, feel free.
I don't mind starting off. I think that the first step is really, it goes back to education. So understanding what you're looking for and understanding what your priorities are, because then you know the questions that you can ask. Once you have those tools and really understanding those priorities, you can then identify the needs. So identify whether you do need additional resources and team members who may have done this before at other companies or have expertise that you may not, or whether you can just rely on the partners. I think what Sylvia said about the relationships that happen with advertisers and agencies and SSP now has very much changed. So it's very much about partnerships instead of just tech, and having those conversations and being able to ask those questions allows for not just transparency, but also allows for everyone to understand what's going on in the ecosystem. Because I think the challenges that have been built by programmatic in the original days is that it's always been a black box. So SPO kind of gets rid of that persona, and that kind of removes all the fear mongering that we've seen as well, going directly to the agencies saying, you don't know what you're buying, you don't know what your partners, how many partners you're buying the same inventory from and whatnot. So when you have the education, you then have the tools and the questions to be able to ask from your vendors, and your vendors not just turn into your vendors, they're now your partners. So they're able to support you in kind of building a best in service solution where you can get to that inventory for the optimal price. And that I think that we want to make sure that it isn't just a race to the bottom, but you know, everyone is working together to be efficient and strategic, and not just providing a walled garden solution where, you know, like you're just kind of hitting a button, something's happening, the advertiser doesn't know anything, the publisher doesn't know anything, and it's just kind of a process. So I'd say start with education and then be able to ask the questions from your partners.
I think so. If I can jump on this, education is a very, very important one. And as SPOs, this is about asking the right question, what Lisa also mentioned. And I think this is like what I continue speaking when discussing SPO with the partners in the market. You shouldn't make it more complex than it is. SPO is an easy process. The buyer need to realize, like, what are the new additional paths I have to buy the desired inventory, and then start looking into like what would be the best for me. This is not something the buyer can answer on their own. So this is like the collaboration is needed, collaboration with the partners, but also increased speaking and increased dialogues or conversation with the publishers. So asking the questions, and then when it comes to ROI, I think the promise of SPOs is huge. And this is like what the markets and agencies in the markets realize already, since we have a huge adoption of SPO. What we also observe is that the teams are not really hiring new headcounts to execute on SPO. So this is like not overcomplicating, understanding the already existing supply strategy with the trading teams and programmatic teams, which already work on programmatic on a daily basis, which allow buyers to buy more efficient and decide on the preferred partners in the future. So the ROI should be high.
If I might just add a couple sentences, I would say that we as buyers, I was previously a buyer, we were doing SPO before we even coined the term of SPO. We were always trying to find the best path to the user that I want to target, to the impressions that I want to buy. And by best, I mean the cheapest one, but at the end of the day, the one that provided us with the best return on the investment in the media buy. So it might be a specific private deal or a specific SSP on the open exchange. So, and of course the specific DSPs might also provide us with different results. So we were kind of doing it way before we even knew that it's named SPO. So it might be difficult to estimate the costs, because your organization might already be doing it to some extent, and it might also need some, maybe making it more systematic, or trying to focus on different things that you were doing previously, but you're probably doing at least a part of it already.
Are we already doing DPO, just from a publisher perspective? Mark, I'll come to you with regards to kind of cost and resource, and again, Simon, you can jump in as well. But yeah, what is the cost to a publisher and resource potentially for delivering DPO? And again, deliver ROI.
Yeah, I think Christoph has a great point there, is that most people are already working in this vein in some way. I think when you're undertaking DPO, organically programmatic teams, anyone that's head of revenue, head of yield, anyone that works on any of those management teams, or even on ad ops teams, are working towards demand path optimization as part of their normal function. I think the question in terms of ROI comes down to how much do you want to invest in a more advanced understanding? Do you want to ramp up, your level of investment in this that will correspond with either bringing on specialists, we're bringing on consultants, bringing on programmatic analytic technologies that will help you in these processes? I think that's the overall question. And I think there's a twofold answer to that. Is one, what does our revenue picture currently look like relative to these costs, right? Is it something where absolutely we can spend, a couple grand on bringing someone on to specialize in this? In terms of our overall revenue, what percentage is that? Is it small? Is that going to be half our revenue for this month? Maybe not a great idea then. But then also, how complicated is your infrastructure? If you're only working with a handful of partners right now, frankly, bringing on a consultant and saying, hey, tell me if I should be working with my 3 header bidding partners, they're probably not going to be able to give you great insights, simply because there's not a lot to work with there. I think if you have a more complicated landscape and you're seeing higher levels of revenue, then it's worth investing more because the return on investment concurrently will be more. And I think that's part of the game, is that untangling a lot is fairly complicated. If you don't have to untangle too much, it's not that complicated, frankly.
And Christoph, I know you've got experience on both sides of the fence. I'm going to come back to you again just to summarize.
Well, I was nodding all the time because I totally agree with Mark. You are also doing the DPO as well at this point, because it's, well, the easiest way to do DPO is the header bidding, right? It does the optimization of the way you are selling your impressions. But at the end of the day, you don't want too many partners in the header bidding stack for obvious reasons. So you should always take into account, maybe from the higher perspective, how is your website performing? Also taking into account all the KPIs that were mentioned during the previous presentation, which are also affected by how you're creating your header bidding stack, or more broadly, your programmatic stack. And one of the best parameters that we like to take a look at is the request CPM. So it's cost, well, it's the revenue per 1,000 ad requests, which is it takes into account not only the amount of impressions that we are selling in a specific SSP, but also the revenue that it generates. So this is, like I said, this is one of the easiest parameters to measure, to find the best performing SSPs.
I spent many of my previous career looking at ad request eCPM on a daily basis, so I completely concur with you there. We're going to go for a kind of a bigger picture question now. Lisa, I'm going to come to you again. Does SPO and DPO accelerate consolidation in the ad tech market?
Absolutely. I think that because you are looking under the hood and understanding where the supply is coming from, you as a buyer or you as a DSP are saying, why do I have all these connections? And it varies across the board. We've seen holding companies say, we're buying from 80, we want to go to 40. We're buying from 20, we want to go to 1. We're buying from 20, we want to go to 3. So I think that absolutely consolidation is sped up because of SPO, because it's all about the value props. So the people or the vendors that have the relationships, that have the supply, and that are able to provide the things that the agencies or the brands are looking for, are the ones that are going to get called upon. I mean, I know we're having conversations with parts of the buy side where they were like, oh, you know what, we thought we were going to start thinking about this. Thanks for calling us. That's exactly where, that's exactly the conversation we want to be having. And so I think it's only going to speed up the consolidation.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more here, just because when we think that buyers within the SPO decide on intermediaries, only those intermediaries who add value to the ecosystem and to the buying, they will then kick off one after another. So this is like the supply path, as I mentioned also, or we all agreed, is like about better outcomes. So this is coming like automatically. Furthermore, if we think like, or this is the observation also we make in the markets, that buyers used to buy through hundreds of SSPs without being aware of the fact that there are so many paths to the supply they want to buy. Now, just because the attention is there and they are looking into the details and then trying to focus on the most efficient paths, they will automatically buy through or cut out the paths they don't really need, they don't know, they don't trust. So this definitely brings consolidation with itself. And when speaking with the buyers in the markets, this is also like how we here, they understand the SPO, like to consolidate and to 3-5 preferred partners.
Thank you very much. And just coming, Mark, on the DPO element as well, I know that we were, on the publisher side, header bidding has opened up more access to more SSPs or more demand sources. So is it the same? Are we likely to see DPO cause consolidation?
Yeah, I definitely think we're ripe for an era of consolidation, I'll say. I don't know if that's going to be the long-term trend, though, right? I view DPO much along the lines of evolution, right? It's not the biggest or the strongest that necessarily will survive. It's the fittest. And therefore, I think that and frankly, we've gone through a glut of expansion, right? Publishers have largely expanded the number of partners that they've worked with by a multitude over the last 5 years. I think the next 5 years we'll see a decrease in the number of partners that publishers work with. But I also think we'll see diversification in the market. And we're going to see many more of these niche kind of agencies, niche DSPs and SSPs start popping up. Travel-focused DSPs are very hot right now. I think they may be looking for direct partnerships with travel-focused publishers. And that is that type of demand path optimization to say, this isn't the largest partner in the world, but for me, because of who I am, this is a very, very valuable partner. That might not be true for everyone, but for me it is. Or even thinking about seasonal partners, right? We're about to enter Q4. Historically, I know that it is a great time to work with a retargeter because agencies are shifting their budgets away from branding campaigns and into more direct ROI focused customer acquisition channels such as retargeting. Their budgets are going to swell. Maybe you don't want to work with that partner in Q1 in January. But you certainly should want to work with that partner in Q4 around the holiday season. So I think that's where we get into the more nuanced discussion. It's not just, hey, should I work with more partners or should I work with less partners? Should I work with the biggest partners? I really see it as I need to find the right partners for me in the right time as well. And I think that's going to be the next stage after kind of a little bit of a thinning after our recent, let's say, buffet of partners that we've kind of all engaged in. I think we're going to take the step back, but I think long term we will see a more diverse market actually evolve out of this as buyers and sellers become more kind of specified around who they want to work with.
Thank you very much. I think due to the interest of time, we're just going to jump to the last question because I think it's a critically important one and it's a double question there, but first and foremost, who is responsible for SPO and or DPO and what advice would you give to them? I'll open this to the floor. This is kind of the wrap up as well. So if you've got any key points of view, please do share now.
I guess I'll just take the reins. I think everyone is responsible for it. I don't want to say it's just the head of investment or the head of programmatic. I think that everyone should be educated to have a certain level of an SPO conversation. In terms of advice, I would say be patient because the timelines that you think you'll be able to SPO to, I would say probably double them because of just overall bandwidth and overall education and understanding of capabilities. And I think it goes back to make sure you're asking the right questions. So the IB Europe SPO guide is key for that. We really, when working on it, we thought of every question that you could possibly ask from every piece of the ecosystem. So, and if you think we're missing a question, let us know. But I think just make sure you're asking those questions and don't be afraid to ask them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think just because the trading teams, trading directors or heads of trading do own them or do orchestrate the entire media buying, my observation is that agencies still will address SPO to those teams. But as Lisa also mentioned, I think this is like the matter, everyone should matter. It's just because it is about optimization and better buying and more efficient buying. When it comes to advice, I would say the most important one is don't overcomplicate and focus on the supply strategy and execute on this. This is nothing completely new to you. You should just try to make it better with asking questions the partners in the ecosystem.
If I might add from the publisher's perspective, so the approach to DPO, I fully agree with Lisa because I believe that on every level, every person associated somehow one way or the other with the programmatic buying or selling should understand the concept behind like different setups or using different SSPs. So it's not necessarily the best idea to just jump on the wagon of every new SSP that's on the horizon and trying to test it and adding it to the header bidding stack. So eventually having like 30 or 40 partners there, it's not the best solution. So what I would advise to start with is like to try to learn what worked in the past, because what worked in in the previous years might also work today and in the future. So try to learn which of the platforms were the most profitable for you and which after being introduced generated the most negative effects of implementation. So maybe they should be the ones that you should get rid of at first, just saying. So yeah, like I think that taking a look into the history of what was going on is the best way to start with the DPO, I think.
Yeah, and I completely agree. I think it's the entire organization. I'll even go one step further, specifically from a DPO perspective. I also think you'll see an impact across non-revenue teams, right? Bleeding into editorial, because as you optimize latency, right, that's going to affect the user experience. The user experience is impactful on your writers, your content creators, right? If you're a platform that's hosting, a variety of different contributors, that's something that's attractive to them. So I really see a holistic worldview in terms of demand path optimization, at least, ensuring that you have a more sophisticated overall publisher image. And I think that also has a feedback on revenue, right? As people say, well, this is a site that has quality content because quality content writers or creators come to the site and want to work there because they see it as a streamlined and sophisticated operation. Again, it gets back into that feedback loop. My big piece of advice would be get ready to be uncomfortable, right? Part of everyone buying into this concept of saying we're going to try and optimize demand path means some people are going to have to lose partners, right? There's going to be a trim. Some people are going to have to lose some of their deals. We're going to ask for more sophisticated tags. We're going to ask for specified media quality vendors because we now have relationships. Like I think that there is a little bit more difficult conversations that'll happen, right? Again, we're going back to we're going to be thinning down in a lot of ways. That means bad news for some people. So I would say, not to be negative, this is good in the long term, but it is definitely going to be a couple difficult conversations to be had across the team, and everyone needs to have the focus. The long term will be better if we do these things today.
What a great way to close out. Thank you all, both panelists and co-authors of the guide. Thank you for sharing your knowledge. It was really insightful. I'm sure many of the people YieldFest Online would have taken many things away from them to hopefully implement. We may already be doing SPO and DPO, but thank you very much, YieldFest Online and the audience, and please go download the SPO guide today.
Yes, exactly. So thank you guys for joining us. It was a pleasure having you. David, if it's really your birthday, thank you even more and have a good one. And I will drink to your health after this whole event will end. Lisa, kudos on the virtual background. I was betting on who will be the one using it. I was testing a couple of my own, but fortunately I had a real bookcase behind my back, so I went real live. But still, it's like this sign of times, like this 2020 virtual backgrounds are the new thing, the new black. So thanks for doing that for us. And guys, I hope you can stay with us and hear last two pieces of our YieldFest puzzle. So now I'm signing you off and hope to see you soon promoting the SPO guide, which I also co-authored. So guys, download it. It's a great stuff, great piece of education, and give us your comments. We want to make it better. We want to update it in the upcoming months and quarters. Stay tuned.